Another popular approach, especially these days, is using large language models for thematic analysis as well as sentiment analysis. Now, you might think that's a great idea because large language models are really, really powerful at understanding human language when they interact with you, right? But actually, they were never designed for classification. And that's the really important thing I want you to remember. LLMs are not classifiers. Now, the advantage of a large language model is that it is sophisticated. So yes, in a given piece of feedback, it will be able to sense things like sarcasm, irony, subtle changes in tone. However, the disadvantages are significant, and I would say outweigh significantly the advantages, because the first one is unreliability. So even if you have the same LLM with the same settings and everything, and I can go into a bit more technical detail, but actually, essentially, you can change an LLM to sort of have almost the same output every single time. Even in that scenario, given the same response 10 times, it will not produce 10 identical themes. So I'll say that again. Essentially, if you give an LLM a response from, let's say, an NPS survey or a CSAT survey, it actually will not generate the same theme 10 out of 10 times, even though nothing has changed. The theme structure is still the same, so the number of themes and the theme content are the same, and the response is the same. And the reason for that is because LLMs, by design, are not deterministic. They're probabilistic, and even when you try to minimize the conditions under which they sort of are varying in what they generate, they actually do have variability built in. So it's very difficult to do reliable analysis when your themes keep changing, even though your response data is the same. So yeah, it's unreliable. However, there are also other things, such as it has no context of CX use cases or customer experiences more broadly. It's been trained on text data, and not a lot of customer data has been open sourced. We at Chattermill have open sourced our own data set, FAPSA. We have published that in neurocomputing. But there are very small amounts of such data available. So most large language models out there, in fact, all large language models off the shelf, do not have that knowledge baked in. So yeah, it doesn't capture a lot of CX instances anyway. And finally, output variability is a significant problem. So what that means is, in addition to getting your themes wrong, it might also make up themes that were not there in the first place, which is obviously very problematic if you want to do reliable trend analysis. So at Chattermill, we talk about how GenAI typically is not sufficient by itself because it cannot summarize everything reliably. You usually cannot also link summaries to the feedback data, even though you might have seen examples where ChatGPT can give you HTML links, but that's because it can access the web, and that's using a tool. In most use cases, it cannot do that for feedback data because it doesn't have that functionality on feedback. And it's not representative. And that's essentially a fancy way of saying, imagine you have 1,000 responses about a particular topic, but actually 1 or 2 comments in there that are a bit odd and weird. The GenAI might actually look at those odd and weird sort of idiosyncratic comments and surface those more than the more representative ones, just because they're more salient. Once again, GenAI models change over time, and they're typically built on many smaller models, and for close models, it's hard to sort of say exactly which model is being used, so behaviors will change as well, and you can't reliably bet on a single model being having the same interpretation of a theme over time. And finally, they're not deterministic. So as I mentioned, as a result of that, what you get can be quite different. Lastly, they're also hitting a bit of a plateau. So even though people talk about an exponential increase in AI models over time, actually that's not always the case. In fact, we at Chattermill were talking about this as far back as 2019, where I published a paper on misconceptions of AI that said specifically that there isn't going to be an exponential increase. We are making progress, but actually it's plateauing. And the reason for that is A, we're using up a lot of data it's being trained on, and yes, synthetic data is being generated, but at the same time, the type of data that needs to be generated for CX use cases is not increasing. In terms of another LM limitation, specific to customer experience, is the fact that a lot of text-based data doesn't actually incorporate the immense sort of emotional and sensory motor aspects of customer experience. It only includes a lot of the things that people write about which are a lot more one-dimensional than you might think at first. And as a result of that, when you rely on LLMs specifically to sort of just summarize everything, you miss out on these other experiences. So yeah, that's also one of the well-known limits of LLMs, and people at like Stanford's High human-centered AI team will talk specifically around the limits of how this multimodal perspective is lacking in LLMs, which is obviously like an area of research in academia, but it hasn't made its way into commercial LLM applications yet.